And the White House started the year with a record-breaking number of executive orders in President Trump's first 100 days and didn't slow down throughout 2025. As national correspondent Matt Gelka explains, some of his orders have tested the lengths of presidential power.
Heading into December, the president had signed more than 200 executive orders. He's issued more than Joe Biden did in all of his 4 years, and he's far outpaced his own first 4 years in the White House, where he signed 220 over the course of his entire term. The current number has been achieved in less than a year in office for his second term. The executive orders have covered things like banning DEI policies, TikTok deadlines, and election-strengthening measures. They've also covered Trump's #1 economic issue, tariffs, and he used EOs to enforce different tariff rates on countries around the world.
The executive's power is to enforce or execute the laws, but the president can't make laws. Only Congress can make laws. That's legislation.
It's your boy. Adam, let's get right to it. A sitting president has confessed to violating the Constitution, just as a federal judge prepares to invoke rarely used constitutional provisions, sparking a crisis that could redefine the presidency. The coming days will determine whether the Constitution applies to everyone, including the most powerful person in the country. Let's break down exactly what Trump confessed to, because the details are absolutely staggering. Trump came out and effectively admitted that his executive orders went far beyond what the Constitution allows. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States, the person who swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, has admitted that he issued orders that violated that very document. Trump admitted that his efforts to curtail birthright citizenship were unconstitutional. He acknowledged that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to all persons born in the United States, and that his executive actions trying to change that were constitutionally questionable at best and outright violations at worst.
Just more than a month after the Supreme Court rejected the Trump administration's attempt to end birthright citizenship, President Trump is trying again. He signed 2 executive orders to limit those rights for certain groups of people. Natalie Brand has details from the White House.
Facing a recent loss at the U.S. Supreme Court for his earlier effort to end birthright citizenship, President Trump is looking at other ways to limit it for certain groups.
Unfortunately, we had a bad decision. Very unfair decision. Our country suffers because of it, and we're ending it a different way.
He signed 2 executive orders Thursday aimed at expanding categories of people not eligible for automatic citizenship upon birth on U.S. soil, including children of a foreign government employee, children of foreign citizens who lobby on behalf of foreign governments, and children of anyone considered, quote, an alien enemy of the U.S. The administration says it's also cracking down on what it calls birth tourism.
Trump admitted that his actions surrounding January 6th, his statements, his pressure on officials, his efforts to disrupt the certification of the election, all of that tested the boundaries of presidential power and likely crossed the line into unconstitutional conduct. Trump apparently made these admissions in recent interviews and communications with his legal team. And now, his own words are being reported publicly. His own words are becoming part of the legal record. His own words are evidence that Trump himself understood he was violating the Constitution. This is devastating because it eliminates any possible defense Trump might have tried to raise. He can't claim ignorance. He can't claim he was following legal advice. He can't claim he didn't understand what he was doing. He confessed. He admitted it. He said the quiet part out loud. Now, while Trump's confession is sending shockwaves through the political establishment, a federal judge is preparing to make an equally extraordinary move. This isn't your typical courtroom ruling. We're not talking about a standard legal remedy or a routine judicial decision.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The U.S. Supreme Court today issued 2 major rulings that significantly expand presidential power and President Donald Trump's attempt to further reshape the federal government.
In a 5-4 ruling written by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court's justices said the president does not have the power to fire Lisa Cook, a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. In the decision, the Chief Justice wrote, quote, to accept any one of the administration's arguments would in effect transform the Federal Reserve's for-cause protection into at-will employment, an interpretive leap out of step with the statute Congress enacted and our nation's tradition of central banking protected from political interference. But in a separate ruling issued today, Justice Roberts handed the president broader power to fire the heads of independent agencies, overturning a nearly century-old legal precedent. In that case, which involved the removal of Federal Trade Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter, the Chief Justice said, quote, subordinates who exercise the president's power are subject to removal by him.
The judge is considering invoking rarely used constitutional provisions to hold Trump accountable. Specifically, there's talk of the 14th Amendment disqualification clause, a provision that was designed to prevent people who engaged in insurrection from holding federal office. This clause was created after the Civil War to keep Confederate officials from returning to power. Now, legal scholars and judges are arguing that Trump's conduct around January 6th, his efforts to overturn the election, his pressure on officials, his rhetoric encouraging the mob, all of that constitutes engagement in insurrection. And if Trump engaged in insurrection, he is disqualified from holding office under the 14th Amendment. The judge is apparently looking at Trump's confession, looking at the evidence of constitutional violations, and preparing to invoke this constitutional clause. That's a move that hasn't been used in generations. That's the kind of constitutional weapon that only gets deployed in the most extreme circumstances. And the fact that a federal judge is even considering it tells you just how serious this moment has become.
Power play of sorts today at the Supreme Court. The nation's highest court has given broad powers to the Oval Office when it comes to heads of federal agencies.
Fox 4's Sean Rabb breaks it down for us in studio, along with some other opinions from the justices today. Sean.
Yeah, there were 4 Supreme Court rulings today, and let me tell you that the biggest of all of these, well, it has to do with expanding executive power, giving the sitting president authority to fire heads of federal agencies at will.
Having that power confirmed is something that a lot of presidents wish they could have had. And so that's a pretty substantial win.
The constitutional crisis that Trump has created is evident in every aspect of this situation. The judiciary normally tries to stay out of political fights. The judiciary normally tries to follow precedent and make incremental changes to the law. But Trump has forced the judiciary into a position where dramatic action is the only option. Trump has been attacking the separation of powers. He's been attacking judicial independence. He's been attacking the rule of law itself. And now the judiciary is responding by preparing to use every constitutional tool available to stop him. The judge is essentially saying, if you will not respect constitutional limits voluntarily, if you will not submit to the rule of law, then we will enforce the Constitution through extraordinary means. This is exactly what the founders envisioned when they created a system of checks and balances. When one branch overreaches, the other branches are supposed to push back. And right now, the judiciary is pushing back with unprecedented force. What's particularly wild about this situation is that Trump's confession essentially validates the judiciary's response. If Trump had denied violating the Constitution, if he had claimed that all his actions were perfectly legal, the judge might have had a harder time justifying a rare constitutional move. But Trump confessed. Trump admitted that his actions pushed constitutional limits. Trump essentially validated the idea that he violated the Constitution. So when the judge invokes rare constitutional provisions, the judge is doing so knowing that Trump himself has admitted to constitutional violations. The judge is doing so with Trump's own confession as evidence. That makes the judge's constitutional move much more legally justified and much harder for Trump to defend against. Trump gave the judiciary exactly what it needed to hold him accountable, and he did it with his own words. Let's dig deeper into what Trump actually confessed to and why those confessions are so damaging constitutionally. The executive orders issue is particularly significant because executive orders are not supposed to violate the Constitution. The president has the power to issue executive orders that carry out the law and execute the president's constitutional authority. But the president does not have the power to issue executive orders that violate the Constitution or that exceed the president's constitutional authority. Trump apparently issued executive orders that went beyond what the Constitution allows. He apparently issued executive orders that violated separation of powers principles by intruding on powers that belong to Congress. He apparently issued executive orders that violated individual rights guaranteed by the Constitution. And Trump confessed that he knew these executive orders were pushing constitutional limits. That's not a mistake. That's not an error in judgment. That's a deliberate decision to violate the Constitution. The birthright citizenship issue is also incredibly significant because it involves a fundamental constitutional right. The 14th Amendment clearly states that all persons born in the United States are citizens. That's not ambiguous. That's not subject to interpretation. That's a straightforward constitutional guarantee. But Trump tried to curtail birthright citizenship through executive action. He tried to deny citizenship to people who were born in the United States, but whose parents were not citizens. That violates the 14th Amendment. That violates the Constitution. And Trump apparently confessed that he tried to do this, apparently understanding that it was constitutionally questionable. He knew he was pushing against constitutional limits. He did it anyway, and now he's confessed to it. The January 6th conduct is also constitutional crisis material because Trump's actions on and around that day arguably violated multiple constitutional provisions. The Constitution guarantees that Congress has the power to count electoral votes and certify the election. Trump apparently tried to disrupt that process by pressuring the vice president to reject state certifications. He apparently tried to disrupt that process by encouraging a mob to go to the Capitol and create chaos. He apparently tried to disrupt that process through various legal and political maneuvers designed to overturn the election. All of that violates the Constitution. All of that violates the constitutional process for electing a president. And Trump apparently confessed that he engaged in these actions. He apparently confessed that he understood these actions were testing constitutional limits. He admitted it. Now let's talk about what it means that Trump confessed to these constitutional violations. Confessions are incredibly powerful evidence in legal proceedings. When a defendant confesses to a crime, when a defendant admits to misconduct, that confession is normally decisive. A confession means the defendant cannot claim innocence. A confession means the defendant cannot claim they didn't do what they're accused of doing. A confession means the defendant has essentially admitted guilt. So Trump's confession that he violated the Constitution means Trump cannot claim he didn't violate the Constitution. He cannot claim he didn't know what he was doing. He cannot claim he was following constitutional law. He has confessed. And that confession is going to be used as evidence against him in any legal proceedings. That confession is going to be used by the judge in deciding whether to invoke rare constitutional provisions. That confession is going to be used by Congress in deciding whether to support Trump's removal. The 14th Amendment disqualification clause is particularly important because it's designed specifically for situations where someone has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution. The clause was created after the Civil War to prevent Confederate officials and soldiers from holding office after they had fought against the United States. The clause says that no person who took an oath to uphold the Constitution and then engaged in insurrection can hold federal office. Legal scholars are arguing that Trump engaged in insurrection on January 6th. He organized a campaign to overturn the election. He pressured officials to violate their constitutional duties. He encouraged a mob to storm the Capitol. He tried to prevent the constitutional process of certifying the election. That's insurrection. That's rebellion against the Constitution. And if Trump engaged in insurrection, he is disqualified from holding office under the 14th Amendment. The judge's consideration of invoking this clause is absolutely extraordinary because it would effectively remove Trump from office or prevent him from running for future office. The judge would be using a constitutional provision that was created after the Civil War to prevent Trump from continuing to hold the presidency. That's a dramatic move. That's a constitutional move designed for the most extreme circumstances. But the judge is apparently considering it because Trump's conduct is so serious, so unconstitutional, so dangerous that normal legal remedies are insufficient. The judge is apparently looking at Trump's confessions and the evidence of Trump's constitutional violations and concluding that the 14th Amendment disqualification clause is the appropriate remedy. The judge is apparently prepared to invoke a rarely used constitutional provision to protect the Constitution against Trump's violations. The separation of powers implications are also critical because Trump has been attacking the separation of powers throughout his presidency. He has been trying to concentrate power in the executive branch. He has been trying to limit the power of Congress. He has been trying to interfere with the judiciary. He has been trying to consolidate authority in the presidency. That's fundamentally unconstitutional because the Constitution is designed to divide power among three branches. The Constitution is designed so that no single branch can accumulate too much power. Trump's efforts to consolidate power in the presidency are attacks on the constitutional structure. And Trump's confessions show that Trump understands he's pushing constitutional limits while doing it anyway. The rule of law implications are also devastating because the Constitution only works if people follow it. The Constitution only works if government officials respect constitutional limits on power. The Constitution only works if people submit to the rule of law. But Trump has been saying that the Constitution doesn't apply to him. He has been saying that he can ignore constitutional limits. He has been saying that he doesn't have to follow the Constitution, and he has been acting on those beliefs by violating the Constitution repeatedly. Now he has confessed to constitutional violations, and the judiciary is responding by preparing to invoke rare constitutional provisions designed to protect the Constitution against exactly this kind of assault. The judge is essentially saying, if you will not respect the Constitution voluntarily, if you will not submit to constitutional limits, then the judiciary will enforce the Constitution through extraordinary means. The implications for presidential power going forward are also significant because the judge's rare constitutional move is going to establish new precedent about presidential accountability and constitutional limits. If the judge invokes the 14th Amendment disqualification clause against Trump, if the judge successfully removes Trump from office based on constitutional violations, that sets a precedent that presidents can be removed if they violate the Constitution egregiously enough. That's a new constitutional development. That's a new understanding of presidential accountability. That's a new mechanism for protecting the Constitution against presidential assault. And all of that flows from Trump's willingness to confess to constitutional violations and the judiciary's determination to protect the Constitution. Let's break down why this moment is so historically significant and what comes next. There are critical things you need to understand about why this situation is so unprecedented. First, Trump's confession essentially eliminates any defense he might have tried to make in legal proceedings about constitutional violations. He confessed. He admitted that his actions pushed constitutional limits. He admitted that his executive orders violated the Constitution. He admitted that his actions around January 6th tested constitutional boundaries. There's no way for Trump to now claim innocence. There's no way for Trump to claim he didn't know what he was doing. He has confessed. And confessions are the most powerful evidence possible in legal proceedings. So when the judge invokes rare constitutional provisions to hold Trump accountable, the judge is doing so knowing that Trump has confessed. The judge is doing so with Trump's own confession as evidence. That makes the judge's constitutional move much more legally justified and much harder for Trump to defend against. Second, the judge's preparation to invoke rare constitutional provisions is going to force immediate political action. Congress is going to come under enormous pressure to act. Democrats are going to demand that Congress support the judge's constitutional move. Some Republicans are probably going to come to the same conclusion because Trump has confessed to constitutional violations. Congress is going to have to decide whether to support the Constitution or support Trump. And given that Trump has confessed to violating the Constitution, given that a federal judge is preparing to invoke rare constitutional provisions, Congress is going to find it very difficult to defend Trump. Congress is going to face enormous pressure to let the judge's constitutional move proceed. Congress might even actively support the judge's move by passing legislation that facilitates Trump's removal or disqualification. Third, the combination of Trump's confession and the judge's rare constitutional move is going to establish new precedent about presidential accountability in America. If the judge successfully invokes the 14th Amendment disqualification clause or other rare constitutional provisions, if the judge successfully removes or limits Trump's authority, that's going to establish that presidents can be held accountable for egregious constitutional violations. That's going to establish that the judiciary has the power and the responsibility to protect the Constitution against presidential assault. That's going to establish new constitutional norms about presidential behavior and accountability. And all of that flows from this moment where Trump confesses to constitutional violations and the judge moves to protect the Constitution. Fourth, this moment is going to reshape American politics and constitutional law for generations to come. If Trump is removed from office based on constitutional violations, that's going to be the most dramatic constitutional moment since the Civil War. That's going to show that the Constitution has real teeth. That's going to show that constitutional violations have real consequences. That's going to reshape how future presidents think about constitutional limits. That's going to establish that presidents cannot attack the Constitution with impunity. That's going to fundamentally change the balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. All of that depends on what happens in the next few weeks as the judge prepares to invoke rare constitutional provisions. Here's what's going to happen in the immediate future. First, the judge is going to hold hearings on whether to invoke rare constitutional provisions against Trump. The judge is going to hear arguments from Trump's lawyers about why the judge shouldn't invoke the 14th Amendment disqualification clause or other rare constitutional remedies. Trump's lawyers are going to argue that invocation of these rare provisions is unconstitutional, that it's excessive, that it violates Trump's due process rights, that it's judicial overreach. But the judge is going to listen to these arguments, and the judge is probably going to reject them because Trump confessed to constitutional violations. Trump confessed that he pushed constitutional limits. Trump confessed that his actions violated the Constitution. So, the judge is going to have a strong basis for invoking rare constitutional provisions. Second, Congress is going to become directly involved in the constitutional crisis. Congress is going to hold hearings. Congress is going to debate what role Congress should play in protecting the Constitution. Congress is going to consider whether to pass legislation supporting the judge's constitutional move. Congress is going to consider whether to impeach Trump or invoke the 25th Amendment. Congress is going to come to the realization that Trump's confession and the judge's constitutional move have created a situation that requires congressional action. Congress is going to have to decide whether to support the Constitution or support Trump. And the political pressure on Congress to support the Constitution is going to be enormous because Trump has confessed to constitutional violations. Third, there's going to be intense public debate about the judge's rare constitutional move and what it means for presidential power and constitutional democracy. Constitutional scholars are going to debate whether invoking the 14th Amendment disqualification clause is appropriate. Legal experts are going to debate whether the judge has the authority to make this move. Political commentators are going to debate what this means for Trump's presidency and his legal future. The public is going to be engaged in the debate because this is a fundamental constitutional question. The public is going to understand that what's at stake is whether the Constitution means anything. What's at stake is whether presidents can violate the Constitution with impunity or whether there are real consequences for constitutional violations. What's at stake is whether constitutional democracy can survive a president who attacks the Constitution. Fourth, Trump is going to face a choice between accepting the judge's rare constitutional move or fighting it. If Trump fights, he is going to be fighting the judiciary, Congress, and the Constitution itself. He is going to be fighting against rare constitutional provisions designed to prevent people who engaged in insurrection from holding office. He is going to be fighting against his own confession. He is going to be fighting against overwhelming evidence of constitutional violations. He cannot win that fight. His only option is to accept the judge's constitutional move. His only option is to accept removal or limitation of his presidential authority. But accepting that is also accepting defeat and accepting that constitutional limits on presidential power are real and enforceable. The bigger picture here is that we've reached a constitutional moment where the system of checks and balances is being tested like rarely before. In American history, Trump has attacked the Constitution. Trump has confessed to constitutional violations. The judiciary has responded by preparing to invoke rare constitutional provisions designed to protect the Constitution. Congress is being forced to choose between supporting the Constitution or supporting Trump. The American people are being forced to confront questions about whether constitutional democracy can survive a president who violates the Constitution. And the resolution of this constitutional crisis is going to determine what presidential power looks like in America going forward. It's going to determine whether the Constitution has real teeth or whether presidents can violate it with impunity. It's going to determine whether checks and balances work or whether the presidency has become too powerful to be checked. Trump's confession was a catastrophic mistake because it gave the judge the legal justification to invoke rare constitutional provisions. Trump's confession was a gift to the judiciary because it eliminated Trump's ability to claim innocence. Trump's confession was an acknowledgement that he violated the Constitution. And now the judge is responding by preparing to use the full power of constitutional law to protect the Constitution against Trump's violations. This is the moment where constitutional democracy faces its greatest test since the Civil War. This is the moment where the Constitution fights back against a president who attacks it. This is the moment where the rule of law is either vindicated or dies. The judge's rare constitutional move is going to determine which outcome prevails. And Trump's confession made that judicial move possible and legally justified. This is absolutely historic. This is absolutely unprecedented. And the next few weeks are going to determine the future of American constitutional democracy. We are standing at a crossroads that will define the presidency for generations. The Constitution is fighting back. The judiciary is stepping up. Congress is being forced to choose. And Trump's own words have sealed his fate. This is not a drill. This is not hyperbole. This is the moment where America decides whether the rule of law actually matters, or whether it's just a collection of words on old parchment that can be ignored by anyone with enough power. The judge is preparing to make the most consequential decision in modern American judicial history. Trump has confessed to the most serious constitutional violations imaginable, and the entire nation is watching to see whether the Constitution still has the power to hold a president accountable. The next few weeks will tell us everything about what America is and what America will become. Stay tuned because we are about to witness history unfold in real time.